What's the worst possible reply to, "I'm pregnant"? My sister told my parents she was pregnant. She had been married for a couple of years at this point. My dad said, "What did you go and do that for?" My mom started to cry and said, "Why are you trying to make me seem so old?" Someone asked me, "So you just decided to keep it and see if it works out? Are you sure it's yours?" Different scenario, but a coworker of mine a while ago was smoking on her break and a lady came up to her and said, "That's bad for the baby." My coworker replied, "It's alright, I'm not keeping it anyway." She wasn't pregnant, skull rolling on the floor laughing. "I thought you were just getting fat." Sounds like a you problem. How my coworker's boyfriend responded, "Oh. Make a sense. You're a bit more of a aunt than usual lately." On purpose? You know I just got a vasectomy. My wife is not gonna like this. Edit. Thank you for my first award, I'll cherish it always. Edit 2. Thanks for all the awards you guys. I am currently bragging to my fiancé about how random internet strangers think I'm funny. Hi pregnant, I'm dad. Okay, hey, I'm gonna go grab some milk. People who have 4+ kids, why? Not to brag, but we had X 4 times. My former coworker. She only wanted 2. So after baby 1, she and her husband went to make baby 2, they ended up with baby 2, 3 and 4. Yep, naturally conceived triplets. Husband got a vasectomy after that. People who have 4+ kids, how do you pay for all that? My wife and I have 2 kids together. My sister has 2 kids. She decided she'd rather not take care of them. So I've had them for the last 10 years. I've been raising 4 kids for the last 10 years even though I only have 2 with my wife. Happy Father's Day, all you fellow dads. Family of 6 kids. My parents didn't want us to be lonely. Joke's on them, we're estranged from each other and I don't even know where some of my siblings live. I don't have kids personally, but I am one of 12 siblings. 10 boys and 2 girls. Ages range from 10 to 43. As to why? We were a foster, adoptive home for over 20 years and unfortunately, the system is flawed and a lot of parents don't always meet the requirements to have their children placed back under their care. The goal is always reunification with biological family, but sometimes there are no valid placement options or extended family members willing to be their guardians. Every child my parents took in we treated as family, and when the state exhausted their options of reunification, we decided we weren't going to let them get put into the state-run group homes to get lost in the system, and we happily chose to adopt and make them officially family. It was organized chaos our entire lives, but none of us would have had it any other way. Had a tough time conceiving our first because my wife has PCOS. After our first was born, the gynecologist told us to be careful due to a high chance of conceiving. We were careful for 6 months after, then one night we lost control and 38 weeks later triplets appeared. I'm one of 5 boys. Each one just under or just over 2 years gap, except oldest who are twins, so we all grew up pretty close in age. I can't speak to why my parents had 5 kids, but I can say that being one of 5 brothers was fucking awesome growing up. We wandered the neighborhood, looking out for each other and always having someone to play with. As we got older, nobody ucked with one of us because you're gonna get jumped by 4 other dudes. Now we're grown up and starting to have kids, who all have lots of awesome uncles. Had our first child, easy breezy. We tried for maybe 1-2 months. 2 years go by. Okay, we're ready to try for number 2. Like a year and a half of no luck. Then, boom, triplets. Identical at that. Doesn't run in the families, no fertility drugs. Just dumb chance. 4 girls under 4. PLZ send help when they're teenagers. Why's everyone in this thread keep accidentally having triplets? My parents had 3 of us back to back and dad got a vasectomy. 10 years later, they were in a good spot financially and we had extra space in the house, so they decided to adopt 2 sisters, ages 5 and 4. My dad was adopted as an older kid, so they wanted to make a difference in the lives of a couple of older kids too. Gotta share this story. So my friend is one of 6. The parents had 4 boys all in a row, and his mom wanted at least 1 girl. They tried again, they had twin boys lol. They were all built like brick hit houses too, so I asked him what's a meal like that look like. He giggles and said, we got fed a lot of potatoes. I'm the oldest of 5, because my mother likes babies, toddlers, so she kept having them. She's not a fan of humans with actual thoughts or opinions, so she didn't really like us for too long though. My dad wanted 2, maybe 3 kids. Threats that I won't go into, and doctors refusing to do a vasectomy both played a part in the 2/3 extra kids. Edit, I never wanted to be that person, but this is me first ever award, after 2 years on Reddit, and it's kind of awesome. So thank you. Also, edit notic my mom and her too many kids. Sort by controversial if you want to find happy parents. You get $10,000 if you make a girl reject you on a date in under a minute. What do you do? Tell her I want to have a 3-way with her and her best friend. Best case 10K, also best case 3-way. So I've got this really great job offer for you where you get to be your own boss and make your own hours. Tell her we might as well get right down to ucking and we can go to my place as long as she is quiet because my mom is sleeping on the couch and the motel doesn't allow visitors after 8 o'clock. All I have to do is show up. Offer her $500 if she agrees to reject me within 30 seconds. So this is my Reddit account. Ask her if she has a younger sister. Take mother along and do the introductions. I'm not racist but then spout every bit of profanity known to man. A guy did this, and I walked out in under 30 seconds. I be brutally honest. Every kink, every insecurity, every annoyance. I tell her I'm terminally orny, I'm a sub, I'd almost rather be her pet. For 60 seconds I dump every weird quirk I've got, every hopeful fantasy, every detail of my headspace. All of it. Even the weird tags. If that doesn't work, if she's still ready to go for it after all that, UCK the 10K. We're going to have a nice dinner. Then I'm going to go back to her place and let her peg me like she's trying to knock me up. Edit. And putting a ring on it. What's the most ucked up drama from somewhere you've lived? 50-year-old teacher ucked a 16-year-old student. He gave her an STD and then his wife murdered him. I didn't see the accident. But while living in Jamaica I saw a man carrying a mangled body just walking in the country. I later learned they were brothers and worked construction together. One brother fell from a great height, and the other brother was just carrying his body, walking towards the hospital even though the brother had died on impact. He was just in a terrible sad mania. In my hometown, the mayor's kid got drunk and killed someone in a hit and run. He got a slap on the wrist and the mayor was re-elected. Woman calls her mother at 3 a.m., tells her to come get the kids. Hangs herself off banister. Her husband was found upstairs hidden under a pile of blankets, stabbed a ridiculous number of times. Rumor has it the guy was a special ed teacher and the wife found out he had been molesting and sexually assaulting some of his students. My small town. New Year's Eve 1998. A bunch off grade 11/12ths and some first-year college kids were having a party. The parents knew about it but were out of town so they asked one of the neighbors to check on the kids. They knew there would be alcohol. The neighbor went to check as asked but whatever went down is still a bit murky. Apparently there was a lot of cocaine involved, a fight broke out, and the neighbor was killed. A code of silence fell over every teenager in town. Even if you weren't at the party you knew someone who was, another neighbor, a sibling, your old babysitter, etc. We had endless assemblies at school about code of silence, and how it hurts more in the end. It took several years of undercover work from RCMP but they did eventually get the guy responsible. We all knew who it was but they needed solid evidence. It was a wild case and it was the talk of the town for years. There was a fetish burglar who terrorized my hometown and broke into around 150 homes. My mom was terrified for years. Super creepy hit like taking small personal items, stalking, eating food from fridges, laying out panties down the hall in a pattern, tearing up photos, etc. My house and my grandmother's were in his hunting zone. The cops downplayed it. He was caught 40 ucking years later and is now known as the Golden State Killer. My job just had me train a guy who quit after a week and then murdered one of his family members. It's not that ucked up but it's pretty crazy. When I sophomore in high school there was a lady cop who actually went undercover in our school. I never once met or saw her personally, and apparently she got in with the burnouts and cool guys that sold, did drugs. One day they came to our school and arrested like 20 kids in the middle of class. One was arrested in my second period Spanish class. Cops showed up and asked for him and told him to go with them and he walked up calmly and they pounced. Throwing him against the wall and slapping on cuffs in front of a room full of about 25 to 30 students. One kid jumped out a window trying to escape. Later turned out that the lady cop who was undercover like ucked a few of the students or gave them oral or something. The details were pretty murky. Ended up making the news and most people had never even heard of our town beforehand. It was pretty wild. This one spans decades. 1979. 4 aspiring thugs I went to high school with, steal a mini bike, but are caught in the process by a 12-year-old boy. So they murder him. The star witness against them is a 5th student, that the general scuttlebutt around the school said was just as involved as the other 4. But, he testifies and is protected by an assistant district attorney at the time. This basically makes the assistant DA's career. He later goes on to become a district attorney. He mentors the star witness and pulls some strings to get the kid onto the police force. The star witness, with plenty of support from the DA, goes on to become the chief of police. A junkie breaks into the chief's car and steals a bag holding the chief's weapon, Orn and X toys. He gets caught. The chief has him chained to the floor of a holding cell and beats the hell out of him. The junkie's story makes it to the press. The chief is investigated. The DA obstructs justice on the chief's behalf and they both go down in flames. The chief is accused of assaulting a suspect in police custody, a subsequent cover-up, and coercion of witnesses. He pleads guilty to lesser charges. He goes to prison. The DA is convicted of federal obstruction of justice charges in the investigation of the chief. He is convicted, fined $100,000 and sentenced to 5 years in prison. The chief is considered, for a time, not sure what his status is now, a suspect in the Lisk, Long Island serial killer investigation. Edit. The 4 that murdered the 12-year-old we reconvicted, largely on the basis of the future chief of police's testimony, by the way. The crows have taught themselves to bark exactly like my dog when she is being fierce. They fly over her head, barking loudly at her, which upsets her sister and the neighbor's dogs. Total chaos. Some SS hole threw out his son during winter. The son froze to death. It took place in Russia, a town where my grandparents lived. A guy convinced every single family member of his, including the kids and the elderly, that he was possessed by their dead patriarch. The entire family was found dead, hanging from the ceiling like the aerial roots of a tree. An act they all willingly participated in, as some sort of ritual. Netflix has a detailed documentary on the event, and it's a whole lot scarier and creepier than what little I have written. 2 or 3 high schoolers set up a drug deal where they'd supply the product. The person buying, Alswan High School, had about $20K on them. They end up robbing the kid, shoot him dead, digging a hole and lighting the remains on fire. They then go to a car dealer and pay cash for I'm not sure what kind of car, Beamer maybe. They were caught, obviously. Our assistant pastor took in his 3 nieces after his brother died. One day, the town discovered that all 3 of them were suspiciously pregnant around the same time. A social worker called the police to investigate what was going on. Turned out the pastor had been sleeping with his own flesh and blood. His wife knew about it and didn't report it. He was arrested and did a stint in prison. Upon release, he became a spiritual healer. He has since gone blind. My parents and I left the town before finding out what had become of the girls after the saga. An entire family got murdered and their house burned down. Everyone thought it was the dad, but it turned out to be the uncle who was involved in a gong and did it as part of initiation. My English teacher went to our high school and had lived in our town most of her life. She told us this story from when she was in our high school. There was a well-known couple at the time. Typical cheerleader and football star type deal. They we resort of off and on again, but it was obvious they did care about each other despite teenage drama. Well, at point when they were off again, she went on a date with a new guy. He drugged and sexually assaulted her. She came home in tears to her older brother and told him what happened. Older brother said he'd handle it. He called the on-off boyfriend, who was also enraged. They both knew the guy who did it, so they pretended to invite him out to a bonfire. The boyfriend picked him up in his truck and drove him to the bonfire. The bonfire was a stump in the middle of nowhere on a family member's property. They chained therapists to it and both took turns hitting his crotch with a sledgehammer. They untied him when they were done and left him there. He ended up at the later that night. The boyfriend and brother both knew the sheriff, because small town. So they called the sheriff to tell him exactly what they did and why. When he showed up to the hospital, the rapist tried to explain what happened, but the sheriff said, "Sounds to me like a domestic issue," and refused to charge the boyfriend or brother with anything because there was no proof of what happened. Rapist got fixed up at the hospital, as much as they could, and left town shortly after graduation. Boyfriend and girlfriend get back together and didn't break up again. They get married after college, have kids, happy ending. Small town justice is very, very real.